Hello?
Over the design for you, so the design engineers, when they came up with that red ring around that ceramic woofer, they nailed it because myself included, when I was younger, and I saw them. They had every I need the blue screen behind.
Recording in progress.
Start. All right. I want to welcome everybody to the December 2022 Lawrence Parks and Recreation Advisory Board meeting. You have house cleaning? Housekeeping?
House cleaning. I'm Roger Steinbrock, the liaison for the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. This is a hybrid meeting via Zoom and also in person. We will have an open point for the public comment for those items that are not on the agenda. If you are wanting to speak to an item that is on the agenda, there will be a time after the presentation by staff, and then the chair, Jackie Becker, will call on individuals with comments to be made for that item on the agenda. We ask people that are in the conversation to please have your camera on. That would be the board members that are online. If you could put your camera on and muted, and then as you are speaking, you can turn on your camera and then unmute. During that open period, we will ask people to raise their hand with the little raise your hand signal that's on the Zoom features for people online. And then if there's anybody in the room with public comment, we will call on them and then follow up with the folks online. With all of those things done, I'll pass it back over to the chair, Jackie Becker.
All right, well, welcome everybody. And our first thing that we need to be doing is approving the minutes for November. So either look them over now, or if you look them over, let us know if there's any changes. If not, I'm looking for a motion to approve.
Jackie, this is Val Renault, board member. I just noticed that Derek wasn't included in the list of people present, and I didn't know if he was supposed to be there. Speaking as an editor, I always notice these weird little details.
Of course.
I think it just has the staff liaison listed on here.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that it's a selection box. So he's never been on there, but his name is in there.
Right.
So
Thanks for that, Val. We are okay to leave it as is.
I know you guys are.
Hurry.
Val, very observant, and I will look into it to see if we can add the other folks, and I can probably just add that in the comment, in the call to order area.
Amber Nickel, board member. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the November meeting. Pat Phillips, board member. I seconded.
Okay. We have a motion from Amber Nickel and a second from Pat Phillips. All those in favor of confirming and approving the minutes for November, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We are now moving into C, the public comment area. And as mentioned earlier, if it's related to something that is on our agenda, we'll save those until after. So if there's any public comment related to something other than what is not on our agenda, now is your time, and let us know. Here's that there is no public comment. So we can head to D, our agenda items. Number one on that is the winter emergency shelter update.
Good evening. My name is Mitch Young. I am with Parks and Recreation, Park District Supervisor. I also have that dotted line position of Houseless Liaison that I've had for 3 years. When asked by the City Manager's Office and our Director to step up and do the winter emergency shelter and hotels. I wanted to come tonight just to update everybody where we are in this so far since we've opened. We are currently about 42 people. That's our highest number was last night. It's growing a little slowly. We started off with almost 30 right out of the gate, and we're up to 42. Things are going very well. We made some changes from last year. We used to store a lot of the belongings inside, and I don't know if you've seen the site box out here, but now we have the storage outside that addressed some of the issues we had, some of the building concerns we had. And then we also changed with we don't have a microwave this year, so that helping. but we do have hot water. So there are some food options available. We are still looking for donations. We struggle a little bit in that area. We are able to get out on social media that we're needing the items that we have on our list, basically just protein items. We're still looking for anything that can be ate out of a cup or eaten out of a cup, I should say, where you just add warm, hot water. Supplies, otherwise, funding. We did start out the shelter with some basic items that were needed. Now we're asking the community to step forward, businesses, not-for-profits, whoever, to help address some of those issues we're looking for. And what it basically is always the same. It's hats, gloves, and hand warmers are the main things that usually are needed. A lot of the hygiene products we've got caught up on pretty good. We've had good donations from the community on that. But I just come here tonight just to give you a little update, kind of where we are, and we appreciate you letting us use your building, the Park and Rec building, the city building. But everything has been going pretty well. So if there's any questions I can answer for you.
How's the number of volunteers? Oh, this is Pat Phillips, board member. How's the number of volunteers? I know there was a shortage for the morning.
So this year we sent out 114 letters to churches, non-for-profits, service organizations, trying to get 7 nights covered. We were able to get 1 night covered by First United Methodist Church. So they are doing tonight. So they'll do that shift to where we don't have any city staff there. We did have to hire staff to do the overnights. We didn't have any luck. Have a few, but we did few volunteers, but not many. So we did have to hire those positions. And then the executive team of City Hall took a night as well. They take Saturday nights. So we also have paid positions on the overnight. So didn't have as good a response we were looking for. But those 2 nights allows me to not come in for 2 nights. So we're doing okay. We got the Sign Up Genius out, and it's getting filled up. We're a little slow at times, but people kind of step in at the last moment when it helps.
Real quick follow-up. Are you still accepting, when you say sign up, is that for staff or is that still for volunteers?
That's for volunteers.
Okay.
Yeah, we have hired everybody that we need to hire. So we are okay there.
John Nalbandian, board member, with the list of items that you need, for some of us, it would be easier just to donate some money. But that's not, you haven't solicited that. It's not that.
So what we are doing, and Derek can help me. What's that title? Douglas County
Community Foundation.
Yeah. So we are able to accept those to the Douglas County Community Foundation. So, if I didn't reply to your email, I apologize. Okay. Yeah. I forget his name, but the gentleman there, he is aware that donations could come in, and Chip. He is aware that donations could come in.
We probably should publicize that a little bit.
Okay, I will get with our team.
Do we have any responsibility, or what is our responsibility for the North Lawrence tent camps?
Let Mitch cover that. So that is a city-ran project. Yeah, that is a city-ran project. So you're asking responsibility. So we've added water, we've added a few.
Is it Parks and Rec responsibility?
What?
Is it Parks and Rec responsibility? No. So whose responsibility is that?
PDS, Planning Development Services.
I want to give a rundown of how that chain works and how that works different from the winter emergency shelter.
Right. So Planning Development Services started a housing initiatives division. So there's Danny Walters, that's manager of that. Then there's Jen Woosley, Cicely Thornton, and then myself. They are two full-time PDS HID employees, and I just have that dotted line position. So that camp Jen started that. So Jen's kind of over the support site, and then Cicely is doing the winter emergency shelter. And I've kind of stepped aside, and then she's taken that lead, but I'm still there working with her, of course, and taking care of that. So yes, Jen Woosley is the person that's in charge of that.
She's not part of Parks and Rec, part of the planning, housing.
Yeah, housing initiative division.
So we support, or you support it as needed.
So all city departments, it's almost like, I don't want to use the word incident commander, but Jeff Creek is the director for planning development services. If Jeff or Danny say, hey, can we have Public Works MSO provide, install this water, do this, do that, or Parks and Rec. So they're doing the coordination, and Parks and Rec might say, hey, can you do this for us? And they go, yeah, I can, but that's low on our priority. We're going to do something else. So it's kind of like if there was a fire or something, an emergency.
Okay.
They've got a good handle on it.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of departments that have stepped up to do the different things that have been needed to make that program.
It'd be nice to have the equivalent of an org chart. Yeah, I mean, just so people could, I don't know, maybe I'm the only one who's really interested in who has responsibility for what, but.
For this initiative being so new, I could see if people in my department are confused and there's people in the public that maybe don't understand, what is the housing initiatives group? What is the homeless programs?
Yes.
And so that, I think we could do a better job as a city communicating how that works.
Yes, so.
Jackie Becker, my question is, over the holidays, do you feel like everything's going to be staffed? Is there anything extra community-wise that we can assist with, to make
sure.
Holidays for everyone?
Sure. There's a board member on the Independence Inc. that he raised some funds, and they're going to be doing a New Year's Eve. So he's asked if we could leave the lights on till 12:15, 12:30. They want to bring in some gift bags. They want to have some apple cider and plastic bottles, of course, and they have some snacks and things like that. So there's somebody that's come forward that wants to do that. As for Christmas Eve, no. We do have some pretty good volunteers for that night already, so we're looking pretty good there. But that's the only event that I'm aware of.
Jackie, this is Marilyn Hull, board member. Mitch, or actually, this is a question for Derek Moore. Derek, how is the support of the shelter impacting the Parks and Recreation budget, either through cash spending or in-kind services?
Derek Rush, Director of Parks and Recreation. I think your question would relate more to Lindsay on, are you asking, is it impacting, say, the first program or class that we offer in the community building in the morning and at the end of the evening?
And no, my question is more, are there Parks and Rec staff that we are paying to do tasks associated with the shelter? And if so, are we getting reimbursed for that from City Hall? I'm just anticipating our bigger budget conversation and wondering if you guys are being asked to do some additional work that you're not reimbursed for or that's not budgeted.
And Derek Rush, Director of Park and Recreation, and I'm going to look to Mitch first, because I think everything that if we spend out of our budget, we're getting reimbursed by the Homeless Initiatives Division. So none of that is, that I'm aware of, is remaining in our budget.
Mitch Young, Parks and Recreation. So yes, to answer your question, we do have a separate budget for that. So I have been making purchases throughout getting ready for this, and since when we started support site. So all of those are paid out of the HID, or the HID, which is Planning Developmental Services. So my salary is the only thing that, like I said, on the dotted line. Probably less than, to put it this way, I haven't asked anything of our park staff in 3 or 4 weeks, and usually it's just little things that help me get a pallet of water or something. So it's usually just a little bit of time. We are getting the building cleaned and overnight as would normally be cleaned. It's being just, they altered their schedule till we are out of there, but we usually leave it in pretty good shape. We don't have any issues. When we leave, the gym floor is ready to be played on. A lot of the staff we have hired are Park and Rec staff, but they're rec centers, leaders, or aquatic staff looking to pick up some extra funds, and it does not interfere with their normal job with Park and Rec.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Mitch?
Thank you.
Thank you so much for stopping in and updating us. All right, we're going to move on to number 2, which is the 2023 Parks and Recreation Fees presentation.
Derek Rogers, Director of Parks and Recreation. This is going to be a 2-part presentation. I'm going to open it up, and Lindsay is going to carry the majority of it, and then we'll come back and regroup at the end of the presentation. Before we go to the next slide, I just want to talk. One, if you can save your questions till the end of the presentation, we'll give the opportunity for input. Secondly, how our budget processes work. Usually we start budgeting in the spring of the calendar year for the following year's budget. So we'll start working on the department's budget. And as we go forward, we'll start working with the city manager's office, and then the department budgets evolve into the city manager's recommended budget. And that gets presented to the city commission, usually around May. And then there'll be tweaks by the city commission or modifications, and it needs to be certified to the state in August, I believe. I think I'm getting my head nods. So another question, just kind of getting off to the start. Our cost recovery model philosophy, and I'll get into a little later, is should recover a percentage of the budget, which is supported by subsidy. And our uniqueness with how we operate in the city of Lawrence and facilities provides some challenges to meeting, I think, our projected cost recovery models and subsidy levels. So there is room there. So looking at the slide, expenses, revenues, fees, and why are we here? There's a few things to note. If you look at the blue columns, which are actual expenses, I did want to note that 22 and 23 are the budgeted expenses. The 22 revenue is an actual projected, and the 23 is a budgeted a revenue. So you can see the gaps there and how things have gone over time. The 22 and 23 budget expense lines also include CIP projects that are budgeted through the general fund and ops budgets. If you look at the 2020 and the 21 budget, 2020 is where we were impacted by COVID. So you can see how the revenues dropped from 2019 to 2020. And then 21, we were still in COVID, but you see our revenues went up. And part of that is we got better at adapting how we open facilities and operated with masks and other programs and classes. So we're able to bring our revenues up. And our focus during the COVID years was mainly on public safety, health, and wellness, and not on cost recovery. So that was our main focus. And that's what we did. And then going into 22, we were coming out of COVID. The first part seemed like we were still slow, but by the spring of 22, things started looking up, and we were optimistic that our participation numbers would get back to normal. Unfortunately, they did not. And so we're tracking very similar on the revenues from 21 to 22. So when we went to the budget, and I proposed that, yes, we can go X amount of dollars over, that was based on the expectation we'd meet budgeted in 22, which we did not. We fell short by about $800,000 to $1 million. We'll get to that later. So if you go budgeted the budgeted from 22 to 23, that dug a deeper hole. Some of the things that have impacted us this year has been expenses coming into 22 and 21 were spiraling, and 22 and 23 upwards. And 22 and 23, We budgeted expenses to improve the quality of life and meet the market rate wages for the city, which just happened to correspond with the high inflation. So that was good. That helped people out. And we used ARPA funds, which was $5 million in 2022 and $5 million in 2023 as part of that. Plus, we've also budgeted more of the indirect costs from the city is reflected as we get better at our priority-based budgeting. I'll get into that a little bit later. Budgeting all expenses, for example, utilities, wages, IT, central garage, administrative, Parks and Rec administrative indirect fees. So that's captured in there and what we should be recovering. Part-time wages is another example where we had to raise wages dramatically. In the summer, at our peak last year, I think we had 720 part-timers. And we still struggle to fill all the positions. So to find and hire folks, we still fell short in the lifeguards. And I don't know where we're going to be this year. I've been focused on other items besides our hiring and retention. What we do have that is relatively new the last few years, most of you may remember when we went to the key fobs for safety and security, which has been paying dividends with, somebody gets banned or causes a problem. Now we know who and where, but it's more equitable on, you caused trouble at the outdoor aquatics and you're now not allowed to go into our facilities for a month. So now we're better at determining that, but we're also better at tracking usage of our facilities. So how many visits in our rec centers? And so the key fobs are adding to that dramatically and helping us with that. So our cost recovery philosophy that we use in the department, this actually originated in Boulder, Colorado, department in the 1990s. Under the leadership of Chris Drapinski, Boulder Certified Parks and Recreation Executive, and their Recreation Superintendent, Linda Katowski, they worked to apply the academic works of Dr. John Crompton and Dr. Charles Lamb regarding marketing, government, and social services of the parks and recreation industry. What they realized was that Boulder, along with many other agencies, had been charging for programs and recovering costs for many years, but did not have a strong foundation underpinning for the whys and the hows they did that. And the intricacies of pricing and cost recovery. What they developed was a cost recovery model that you see in this slide here, and it became a national, regional best practice and regional best practice for parks and recreation. So in 2018, we had ePrep Solutions come from Boulder, Colorado, where this process originated with some of their staff. And they did a fee analysis of where we were in our fee structure. When that came out, we were recovering within the pyramid, but we also took from their review and recommendations, we further refined the model you see on the slide and tailored the national best practice model to reflect Lawrence values. The cost recovery philosophy considers levels of tax support, the subsidy level, based on community values, where those programs that meet high community benefit. For example, the base of the pyramid, most community benefit recovers 0 to 10%. And that'd be our parks or trails, multi-use paths, city band concert in the parks would have the most tax support subsidy. Then at the very top, where you get into highly individualized competitions, athletic sports, private swim lessons, dive lessons, things like that. Our department relies on the cost recovery model, which accounts for different levels of subsidy support when evaluating programs and budgets. So that's what our Parks and Recreation team, after the ePrep Solutions visit, they took this and refined it to how we do business. We also look at market analysis of surrounding area programs to ensure pricing is near the market norm. So what this pyramid factors in is who benefits, what's the skill level, the physical and mental health and safety, the level of service that everyone, is it open to everyone or is it limited by age, ability, or skill? What are our historical expectations of the community? What are we we done, the community expects, for example, holiday lighting, summer band concerts, youth sports? What's the anticipated impacts of service on resources, users, environment, change of service levels, or by not providing the service? The community value of the service, perceptions valued by the community members, policymakers, city staff, leadership, and is it a community builder? So again, kind of like we talked about, the bottom of the tier 1 is most community benefit, recovers 0 to 10%, parks, trails, open space, management, urban forestry, right-of-way, holiday lights. And this gets the most government subsidy. And this is roughly half of our budget of Parks and Recreation, maintains what you see around us. And when I pass off, Lindsay, we'll get to those slides. Tier 2 would be our rec centers, rec facilities management, sports and Ring and Lawrence, nature center, should recover in that 10 to 50% range. A staffed facility should recover 25 to 50%. Tier 3, you get more balance between the individual and the community benefit, 51 to 75%. Camps fall into that, nature education, sports leagues, swim teams, cemeteries. Tier 4, getting a little more individualized. Recreational health and wellness programs, competitive youth and adult sports, golf falls into that tier 4. Tier 5, most community benefit, individual benefit. So golf used to be a enterprise fund. It was at the top of this pyramid, so it recovered 100% or better. So when it transitioned from enterprise to general fund under
enterprise fund?
Enterprise fund is required to recover all costs. So it has to return 100%, which struggling, and there's things we didn't know. Am I missing anything, Mark, on enterprise?
Mark Ecker, Assistant Director. No, that's correct. That basically the enterprise fund recoups all the direct and indirect costs of operating the program, and then funds are able to stay in that fund. So if we make 100,000 more than we spent, that would stay there for us to operate on the following year. So the trick on our golf course was recouping the capital costs and the equipment costs. We did great on the everyday costs. The bigger ticket items were hard to cover it within the fee structures.
Okay, thank you. And then things like personal training, private, highly skill level swim lessons. You're learning the flip turns, you're racing. Downtown event rental venues. So we rent the Carnegie, which is also competitive to downtown. So we also have space like that. Next slide. I'm not an expert on the priority-based budgeting. Our finance director is really well versed in this, but I do want to mention this as part of our budget every year as we talk about budgeting, and we focus on fees in this presentation. Priority-based budgeting is a comprehensive approach that aligns the city's budget with the strategic plan. And I just wanted to bring this up as a reminder, the 2024 budget process and the PBAB aligns with the strategic plan. It basically allocates all direct and indirect operational expenses to program budgets. This allows the city to better understand the true cost of a program, which includes the indirect expenses I mentioned before, the PR, Parks and Rec administration, internal services, water, HR, IT, central garage, for example. Of note, when you look at there, you look at the far right, it says quartile 1 most aligned. So in Lawrence Parks and Recreation, our highest alignment is parks, trails, and open spaces, community events, and downtown streetscapes. Most of our programs fall in quartile 2 and 3, but I do want to identify and discuss just a little bit about quartile 4. So we had quartile 4 programs that are the least aligned with the strategic plan. And for Parks and Recreation, in last year's budget, it was cemetery, levee maintenance, golf course, and Prairie Park Nature Center. We were trying to get a slide that kind of showed the interrelations and just couldn't do it. We tried.
That doesn't make sense.
So I did want to pass now at this part of the presentation, I'm going to hand off to Lindsay and that's it.
Okay, Lindsay Hart, Assistant Director. So from here, I'm going to get into the fee portion of the presentation and wanted to start with this graphic just to show that, going back to looking at the budget jumping from 22 to 23, as you can see, it's a pretty big jump. The blue line indicates, theoretically our fees should follow the blue line. But realistically, what we're trying to do is follow the yellow line. We want to be fair and equitable to the community. We want to be realistic. We need to, stay within our cost recovery pyramid, work within the market rates. And so you can see where it is, it's an art, it's not easy. There's a delicate balance. We have to be realistic. And so just kind of wanted to start off with that, just kind of have that image in your mind as we talk through how we, come across our fees. So moving on, this again just kind of shows a breakdown of the 23 budget. As Derek mentioned earlier, about half our budget, 49% is parks, cemeteries, and CIP. That's mostly community benefit. That's the tier 1 that is, almost all tax supported. So the other side is where recreation and golf has to try to pick up the slack and try to, increase our revenue through fees. Some of it's tax supported, but most of it is primarily supported, through fees and whatever we can do. Okay, so bringing back the graphic from the first slide, this again is just to show a historical reference of where we've been and where we're going. But you can see the 22 to 23 budget comparison, looking at the budgeted numbers of 22. The expenditures were at about 17.5 million and the budgeted revenue was 4.6 million. That was at about a 26% cost recovery. If you look at 23, we've jumped up to trying to get to a 34% cost recovery. And this is closer to where we've been in the past. As you can see, it jumps up quite a bit just because expenses are going that much higher than we've seen before. And so our goal is to try to get to a 34% cost recovery.
Based on those priorities.
Yes. Yeah, I would say so. So again, if you just kind of a snapshot of where we're at and where we're headed, for revenues, our target for this year for 22 is 4.6 million. We are projecting that at the end of this year, we will be at about 3.7. So as Derek mentioned earlier, we are not going to hit our target. And so that chain reaction kind of puts us even further behind the 23 target of 6.4 million. So that brings us to our proposed fee increases for 23. I just wanted to mention that we have over 1,500 fees for Parks and Rec. So we have a lot of different program areas to look at and take into account. And so we've been working closely with staff and analyzing our fees. We've been obviously taking into account our cost recovery philosophy, looking at market rates. And for some of the bigger program budgets, such as cemetery, facility rentals, park and shelter rentals, field rentals, and general recreation programming, we have put together proposed fee increases, and they range from 10 to 30%. So it wasn't a 30% flat across the board. We really, took a deep dive into each program. We wanted to make sure we were being, reasonable and fair and consistent. And so it is a mix of percentages, but it's, about 10 to 30%. And so as part of this presentation, we are proposing to increase these fees effective February 1st. So moving forward, I'm going to break some of these down a little bit and show some examples of what this might look like. So for some recreation programs, summer camp a weekly summer camp would increase from 100 to 130. The Prairie Park Nature Center summer camp would increase from 130 to 190. And then just looking at an example of the youth DeCava baseball 8 and under would be 110 going up to 120. That'd be per individual. And then for adult kickball, Jackie, I know this one, I am both of you, would jump from 165 to 180 per team. So this is just showing you kind of what those numbers might look like. And again, as we've discussed, as Derek, went through the cost recovery pyramid, we take into account instructor fees, supplies, staffing costs, market rates. We look at all these things when we're analyzing our fees and, we adjust those as needed. For cemeteries, here's an example for resident single grave space. It would go from 1,050 to 1,375. Non-resident rate would jump from 1,500 to 1,950. And so next we're going to jump in a little deeper with the aquatics and the golf budget. So starting with aquatics, this is showing you again the 22 versus 23 budgets. The blue is expense and the yellow is revenue. For 22, these are projections where we think we're going to land at the end of the year. And then for 23, it's obviously what is budgeted. So you can see for aquatics, we're going to come in at about 31% cost recovery. And when you look at 23, 56% is where our target is. That's where we should be. And again, based on the cost recovery pyramid, that falls within where the aquatics budget should land. So we definitely came in lower this year than what we were hoping, and this just shows you that. Again, looking at the increase in expenses, obviously there's quite a jump, and that goes back to the priority-based budgeting, which moving into 23, it's merged our budgets together, but it shows the true cost of the program. And so it's a bigger expense budget because now it includes all the internal expenses, which is the IT support and legal and finance and water, utilities, things like that. Before, they were not included in this budget. And you're going to see that it's in all the budgets, but the aquatics and golf example that we're showing is going to show you it's quite an increase. And so we also have inflation and increased chemical costs and part-time staff wages, which we have had to increase, especially for aquatics. As you all know, we've really struggled hiring lifeguards and keeping our staffing levels where we need them to be. And so, we are hopeful that attendance will continue to go up each year. So, the projected expenses will cover, hopefully the increase in hours that we might be able to be open and in staffing and things like that, but it will require us to raise some fees to help with the revenues. So looking at examples of some aquatics fees, here's what we're proposing that it could look like for aquatics. So daily admission would go up $1. So child, teen, and senior would go up from $5 to $6. Adult would go from $6 to $7. And just that snapshot right there, we took an estimate based on 22 attendance numbers. And if we were to raise that dollar, it could give us an increase of $25,000 just on the daily admission. Again, hoping attendance continues to increase even further, which that number could go up, but it just kind of gives you an idea of what these fee increases could look like. Lane rental would go, short course would increase from $7.75 an hour to $10 an hour. The long course would go from $15.50 an hour up to $20 per hour. Then swim lessons would be looking at the week, which is a 2-week session, would be 48, increasing to 55. And then the Saturday would be $28 going up to 32. So now going into Eagle Bend Golf Course, again, like I mentioned for aquatics, you're going to see a big increase in the expenses. And again, this is due to, the true cost of operating the program, the internal services, increased costs for fertilizer, water, things like that. So for 22, revenue projected, revenues are looking great, should be over 100%. Next year, it's going to be a little bit more of a struggle due to the bigger increase in the expense budget. But 84% is typically where we want the golf course to be at. So again, that's the goal that we're shooting for next year. So breaking down the fees for golf course, just taking the example of riding fees for 18 holes, Monday through Thursday fees would increase from 37 to 44. The Friday would be an increase from 39 to 47. And then weekends and holidays would increase from 49 to 59. And again, taking an estimate off of attendance numbers from this year, we're projecting that could give us an increase of 106,000. So with all of that, we obviously want to talk about how are we helping, we want to address equity and inclusion. And we did want to talk about some increased funding that we have available for those who are struggling financially. We obviously want to provide, as much as we can to our community and make sure that, they have access to it. And so we are continuing our We Folks Scholarship in 23, which is for youth, children 17 and under. We did get an increase in that budget up to $55,000. It's typically been around $35,000. So that has gone up for next year. And then we've just created a new adult scholarship fund, and it's budgeted for $30,000. These numbers can go up or down based on need. And we have great support from the city to give us, some wiggle room to make sure that we are offering, assistance to everyone who needs it. And so these numbers could fluctuate next year, and we're going to do our best to offer everything we can to make sure our community has access to our programs. So kind of to wrap things up, just again wanted to just take a look again at the 22 numbers and then compared to 23. So again, our projected end of year revenue for 22, we're looking at about 3.7 million is where we think we're going to go.
What is the
end of year?
End of year.
And so again, the target goal for this year, what was budgeted was 4.6 million. So if we're going to come in short at 3.7, that's a general fund gap of about $900,000.
So what happens with that? Where does that money come from?
Well, we're almost to the end. And then we can have
we'll get to that. So then looking forward to next year, with our proposed fee increases, we did our best. It's kind of difficult to have an accurate number, but we did our best to give a projection. And we think that we can probably come up with revenue of about 4.4 to 4.6 million. That's our best estimate based on these proposed fee increases that we just discussed. So again, the budget revenue for 23 is 6.4 million. So even with these fee increases that we're proposing, we are still looking at a general fund gap of 1.8 to 2 million. And so that's obviously, a pretty big gap that we need to fill, which kind of leads us into kind of our closing thoughts that we want to put out there for discussion. So as we kind of wrap this up, we just wanted to list some options to consider that. Again, we're wanting feedback from the board and the community on how can we work together to close this gap. So one option, we've discussed it before, would be user fees or some type of an annual family pass. Again, just to show an example, a $2 user fee for all our rec centers could possibly bring in $500,000 to $750,000. And we would work together. We would make sure if you're on scholarship, you would not have to pay to get in. We'd have options. We'd be very conscious of, the needs of the community. But again, that just shows you, that's an option that we can look at. We can look at a non-resident Douglas County rate. We're definitely going to look at things like adding special events and new programs, and we're going to continue to do everything we can to generate new revenue. Expanding on the adult swim that we had this summer at the outdoor pool, fun runs, things like that. We will continue to do what we can to provide new programs. And we're also looking at adding new fees for some programs that didn't have fees before. And this would be something such as the ball field practice. We could start adding a fee for that, or possibly an entry fee to the South Park wading pool. Again, there are areas that we can start to look at. Again, this is part of how we close the gap and how this conversation that we need to have. But in closing, we had not raised fees over the last few years based on or due to the pandemic. And so, we definitely were focused at that time on the safety and health and wellness of the community. So now here we are, and we need to start looking at fee increases. And we will be looking at fee increases on an annual basis. Typically, fees may go up 7 to 10% in any given year just based on inflation. And so that's going to be more common practice for us moving forward. And lastly, we just wanted to note we're going to enhance our marketing efforts and do what we can to, bring new people in and increase attendance, which will also help with our numbers. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Derek.
So the last slide, I just want to bring up a few other things we got going. Working on getting the comprehensive plan rolling with the team. And I think fees are something that's going to get analyzed over this next year. So as we look for proposals on filling the gap, that's something that would get refined as we go forward through the next year. And then in 24, ePrep Solutions that we had come out before, we'd contract with them again, have them reevaluate our fee system in 24. One of the things that, looking at all this, it goes back to my memory from when we had, I think it was Public Health came and talked to us, where they had the baseball field and they put all the milk crates and they stood them on the milk crates. And how do we keep equitability? And I think there's ways when we had the discussions, I'll go through these questions, that we can still maintain equitability and ensure that we have that is still unique to our community, but can still address how we do collecting fees and going forward. So in this, first of all, I'd like to compliment the board on the diversity of thought, the users of our facilities, amenities, our parks and rec programs, and passion for the community. I think we're a highly functioning board. We don't always agree between the board and our department and among board members and city staff. But I think that's where we gain strength, is the diversity of opinion and the ability to speak up and speak our minds. So we'll be seeking input from the board and community tonight about options to address our revenue shortfall and other ideas. I saw one of the members of the public question, and we will get to that a little bit later. And besides opening the discussion in general from the board, I would love to hear from each individual board member on their thoughts on these three questions. What are your reactions and thoughts? How we close the gap in our budget? Should we increase fees further? And should we charge fees for admission to all facilities? Sometimes when you're running through the forest, I can't tell you what kind of trees I'm running through, and I should, because I've grown up here and I miss that, where somebody else goes, how is it you charge at the aquatics center, but you don't charge anywhere else? And the inconsistency is something that I hadn't thought about in being fair and equitable. So with that, I will close and open it up to the we'll take that as not to share.
So would you like us now to start with board or start with public comment questions?
It's board questions,
board
and then we'll move to the public.
Well,
and then it's public comment to the board.
Amber.
Well, you had a question.
Do you want to go first? Okay.
The revenue has never met the public expenses. So how is that difference? Where's that money coming from?
That is the subsidy. So in the cost recovery model, we say that everybody should have the opportunity to have a park. So that's we subsidize that at 100% pretty much.
When you say we,
the city.
The city, so that comes out of the city's general fund.
That's our Parks and Rec Department fund, a general fund that supports.
That portion.
So then when we get into going to that subsidy level, we subsidize, say, swim lessons at 40%, or I'm sorry, 60 to 70%, because everybody should learn to swim. So we only need to recover 25% technically from each program. So when you look at the big picture, aquatics average 56%, that's historical value. That's rolling all those different courses from entry levels to individuals into one big budget.
So Darren, you're feeling pressure from City Hall to decrease that space between revenues and expenses? I mean, are they telling you, look, you guys need to do,
Our budget is based on percentages of recovery, and we didn't meet that. We did not meet our budgeted revenue recovery, but those budgeted revenue recoveries, correct me if I'm wrong, Lindsay, fall within our cost recovery model. So we still have some latitude in there, but we did not meet expectations because we didn't have the participation numbers in RFPs.
Sure. Lindsay Hart, Assistant Director. John, I see what you're saying. The graphic, the first graphic, that bar graph you're looking at, the 23, that's what's budgeted. That's what we have to hit. So we don't have to close that gap. The city has said this gap is okay. We just have to hit, which I showed another graphic is about 34% cost recovery.
Have they said that, or
that's what was submitted with the
and that's, I've got to get us back on footing, on good financial sustainable footing. And we haven't been there for years.
So that we're not vulnerable to general fund allocations or whatever, less vulnerable.
To one of your questions, what happens if we say, fine, we don't fill the gap? Somewhere in the city, we have to fix that gap.
Yes, okay.
So what do we not do as a city, which goes back to priority-based budgeting and what are the values? And so we're in a much better place as a department and a city by the department meeting the budgeted goals.
Got it.
Board member, I have a question about, you gave an example of some of the programs, the fee differences that you were suggesting. Is that just an example, or is that all the programs that you are going to?
Those are just examples.
So you're going to do many more other.
Yeah. So as I started kind of in the first part of that slides, we have over 1,500 fees. And so it was obviously would take a long time to go through all those tonight. So we just wanted to show you some examples, but we have analyzed every single fee and there will be a change in almost every single one. And so we are trying to increase everything. There are some general recreation programs that already adjust fees throughout the year. For example, I know gymnastics just raised earlier this year, so they're not going to go up January 1st or February 1st. And so they're kind of analyzing and making adjustments as needed. But some of the bigger programs, such as, again, the cemetery, the facility rentals, parks and shelters, and aquatics and golf, we're analyzing. Those are some of our bigger areas. We have the full breakdown of all of those. And once we're ready to pull this out, we'll be able to share the entire list. I don't know exactly how we're going to share it, but we do have fees for everything across the board.
Okay. And you also indicated on the slide what that would add as far as to the budget.
Correct.
Okay. And then there was a second part that you came up with some ideas of how to close that gap. And one being a yearly membership fee, as well as some ideas of runs and things like that. Did you come up with a cost? I saw the membership fee, you came up with a cost, what that would add. But the other things, did you come up with how that would contribute revenue?
We did not, but we wanted to open that up for discussion and see what direction, the board or the public would like us to look at. And then, the plan is that we're going to come back in January as a follow-up. And so we can take a deeper dive into some of these and give more accurate estimates if we, kind of decide what path or what options we want to look at.
Okay. Is this just a question time, or is this opinion time too?
You can do it anyway.
I mean, are there more questions of the similar nature where a slide had a question from? All right, so let's go then with John. And John first.
Hi, this is John Blazek, board member, and I'll be happy to answer those three questions, but I've got to have some clarification because these are going to really focus toward Derek, a little bit toward Lindsay and Roger. I'm all for the budgeting. I've talked to four of my very close friends that are recreation people around, and we've got to raise some prices, no doubt, across the board for us. And I'm a supporter of that, but everything I'm seeing is raising fees, which is okay. You got to tell me, Derek, you're the director of the rec. What are you doing within the department? Or is it just going to be thrown back at raising fees to the community? Are you cutting staff? Are you closing buildings? What are you guys being held accountable for on the shortage of money? So what are you going to do?
Director of Parks and Recreation, good comments, John. This discussion is on fees. As we go into the 23 or 24 budget discussions, we're going to have to look at these tough questions on if we don't make our revenues, how are we going to adjust for that? million isn't going to come all out of Parks and Rec. It could, and that would be really hard. But what do we not do in the community if we don't fill that budget gap? So those questions will be later tonight. I wanted to focus on the fees and the cost recovery and those three questions. And then the later questions will happen during the 24 budget, which will be starting here this next month.
This is John Blazik again. Can you fill me in, Roger? What have you done with sponsorships? Anything? Any income? Every penny counts, people.
Go ahead.
No, John, again, during 2022, I have been reassigned to other functions like the right-of-way street events, was overseeing the enrollment management system, which we're now moving over to the recreation side of the house. We are in negotiation with someone currently for the sponsorship at SPL. We're still working on the details to that. I'm hoping to get a contract up to legal this week. Actually, I talked to our director of the legal area just over at an event earlier and last week that, you know, I'm going to get it to her hopefully by Friday, depending on how things lay out with my schedule. Again, it's time, John. For me, you only have so many hours in the day, and I've been, you know, had several different things that I've been allocating time towards based on what the department's needs are.
So as a sponsorship marketing guy,
pardon me, I'm sorry.
I'm just saying as a marketing person for years, I'm kind of hearing that nothing, zero for sponsorships. Do you look at the other facilities that you guys are competing against on their marketing and their sponsorships? I mean, I've not heard of a sponsorship in town yet, guys, and I've been with you for 6 years now. So I know a little bit more than a lot of the board members, but I mean, that's another place.
I would like to speak to that as well. John, we have done sponsorships out at SPL on the wall that we have sold. We have had to shut down for 2 years while that was going on. You can't sell sponsorships when people aren't seeing their signage.
Sure.
So we are currently getting that program up and running, and we're moving that, transitioning that over to Taylor at the Sports Pavilion. And I know that we've got several people that he's working with to reestablish that. In some of the discussions with Prairie Park Nature Center, it's that same type of discussion that's going on as sponsorship for that facility. You know, we called it the low-hanging fruit. I don't think we need to update on low-hanging fruit all the time, but there are things being done and discussed. So
Okay.
Lindsay Hart, Assistant Director. I'd just like to throw in also, I know just this week we had 2 sponsors come into SPL that Roger just mentioned, and we are becoming more active. And I'd like to introduce Kent Reddick, our Recreation Operations Manager, and he has actually secured a few sponsors this year. And I'll let him jump in and give you an update on that.
Yeah, Kent Reddick, Recreation Operations Manager. I have rekindled the sponsorship with Dick's Sporting Goods. For this year, we did get $3,500 worth of value, some cash, some gift in kind. We are looking to improve that moving forward. And we've also started to work with other businesses, as I've also been working with Taylor at SPL to revive what they had out there and look at adding new. So I know Roger stated he's working on a big one as well. And so, John, we are reaching out to the community members and working on that, but the larger sponsorships take time, and we have to have activities and products out there for them to get visibility in order to sell it for their purpose. So as we start bringing back activities, programs, and events, that's the opportunity to sell sponsorships.
Yeah, I know. I understand, Ken. I did it for years. So,
yeah. And Lindsay, John, I will say too, I appreciate you holding us accountable as well. Again, there are so many things that have, you know, in terms of the priorities that we have at the time, and we have to adjust and flow those priorities and work demand, so to speak. And I've tried to juggle it. Maybe I've done a poor job, and I will let that be based on what Derek thinks my performance is, and I try to do as much as I can with the staffing I have. We have, and with that being said, we have increased the staffing in the marketing area. We've got to get them under the, there's been some training and things going on. I'm looking at 2023 as a year that we can really start making some inroads, because one of the things, John, I've had to learn too, is having been a one-person show for so long, I'm now having to elevate myself and to delegate. And after a 20+ year career doing things solo, it's a different beast when you finally realize, hey, I've got support now. And it goes back to trust and training and many different things. So I would I know you've been on the board for a long time and the expectations are there. I'm just asking for just a little more time to showcase a little bit about what we can do. Not only my staff, but the new people that have been brought on in the last year. I think we're on good footing for a lot of success coming forward.
Okay, thank you. I've got some other questions from community members that I want to ask. Lindsay, I know we talked in August and you were talking about 50%. You were down about 50 or 60, thought it would raise. Why are our numbers down? What are your thoughts on that? Our participation numbers, which then also brings in fees.
Lindsay Hart, Assistant Director. I don't know that we know the answer, but I know it seems to be across other communities and other parks and recreation agencies. I think the pandemic changed the way people recreate and do things. And so, early this year, we were still under mask mandate and we were still closing, limiting access to our facilities. So we got a really slow start to the year. And I think finally summer hit and people started coming out a little bit more, but it's been a slow incline to try to get back to where we were pre-pandemic. So I think some people just still aren't ready to come back, but other people have completely changed their habits. And we have to continue to keep an eye on that. And we may have to change the way we do things and manage our expectations differently, because I think this really has changed the way of life for a lot of people. Derek had mentioned that, we saw an increase in revenue in 21 because we got creative and we kind of learned how to reprogram some things, but we have to continue thinking outside the box and realizing there has to be different ways to reach out to people, and it just may not look like the way it did before.
Totally understand. And I respect that. I just know when your offices were closed and nobody knows anybody, that's what I hear why people have kind of backed away. They just don't know where to go or what to do. Tell me a little bit. I'm looking at this golf thing. How did you raise theirs? I think it said 1.2 million to 2.1. How did it go up? Nobody explained why it raised up $1 million.
Are you talking about the expenses, John?
Well, your budget for this year was like 1.2 and they were over it. And then next year they're 20% down. You said 2.1 million at the golf course. You raised it $1 million. Can you explain to the community what that $1 million is? Why it went up that high? Yeah, I don't know.
It goes back to when we talk about the PBB budget, moving into 23, the maintenance budget and the operations budget are going to be combined, and they were not combined before. So we had two separate budgets, and the operations budget is the only one that had to look at revenues compared to it. So now we've combined those into one budget. So that has increased. So when you look from 22 to 23, you're seeing the maintenance budget added to that.
Okay.
And also take into account inflation and just the cost of the internal services that were not included previously as well.
And water.
And water.
Okay.
Water is a big
City
one.
water.
The city water is probably the biggest factor into that.
Okay, Lindsay, and I appreciate that because that wasn't said the first time. So tell me on the water, do you all get what I get at my house? Do you have a meter? What do you pay per water, per gallon? How do you know how much water is used out there based upon weather? Did you have data?
Mark Ecker, Assistant Director. So you're seeing a little bit of change in philosophy for the city. In the past, the golf course didn't pay for water. This year, 22, we paid for a percentage of the water. 23, we're paying full cost of the water. So depending on the year, we'll run between 30 and 40 million gallons of water. So that's weather dependent. And we can conserve all we want, but there's a certain amount of water we need to operate the golf course.
Sure.
So,
how do you know, Mark, how do you know how much you use?
We have a meter on it.
Oh,
It's
okay.
metered just like anybody else. There's one big line that comes into the golf course that runs both the irrigation system and the front and back end of the golf course.
Okay. All righty. And my last question, Derek, talk to me a little bit. Are we pretty over budget? Because I know you've added I know you don't like to eliminate staff because that's most of the first things a business does or a school does when you're over budgeted. And you've added staff. I know you've added quite a few administrative positions that are well paid. Is that hurt our salaries? Is that why we're getting stuck with more taxmen? You got a lot of community members, people asking questions out there, and they know that I'll be black and white and I'll ask it. So I'm asking this for the community.
So Derek Rogers, Director of Parks and Recreation. For example, this year we drew down the staff. So we drew down.
You did what?
We eliminated a position that we didn't refill, which actually will help part of the cost recovery because that position's gone. I don't want to use sports. We combine that position's eliminated. When we created the communications and events division, we took internally 2.5 positions and drew them down to 2 positions. So we funded those 2 positions by we lost a half position there. So we've done the internal restructuring. What you're seeing as we did the market analysis, we started doing a market analysis on what should be the market rate for city employees. And so part of what the city did is we took ARPA money and we put $5 million into pay, benefits, and wages in 22. And we put another $5 million in 23 in the pay, benefits, and wages. So that is a big cost and increase in expenditures. And then on our part-time salaries, we went up in a lot of cases around 30%. Is that fair to say? Just trying to attract part-time help. And when we have 700 employees in the summertime, that's a significant also increase in expenditures.
And I support that, Derek. I knew you had to go up on fees. My point was this, that I think community needs to know that because I've asked you a number of times on staff deductions and reductions and yada, yada. I know you eliminated 1 position here. I know when Lee retired, you filled it with 2. So I think you ought to make it very transparent on what you've done on employees, on what you've done. And people are asking, what have you guys done within the rec program to help offset it between buildings, closing, and staffing? And I'm just bringing this stuff up because I know you're going to be asked pretty tough questions like that. But I didn't know you removed the staff. I didn't have a clue. I think that stuff might want to be transparent just as you get ready to, because I'm sure you're going to hear things from people raising but I understand it. And I told you I support that. But I think there's some things that you guys have to become accountable for in a rec program of what you're doing and trying to help yourself. So that was my last question. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Marilyn, I saw your hand up also.
Yeah, I have a few different things. First, John and I don't always agree on things, but I also have on my list reduced service levels, not staffing levels per se, but you're asking us what we think about raising fees, but you're not really telling us what the alternatives are for closing the gap. Is it possible to cut back on the open recreation hours at the rec center? Is it possible to reduce the open times on the swimming pools or the golf courses or things like that? I think I'm kind of interested in that as well. If there are times when the facilities are pretty dead and there's a minimum amount of users, is it worth having them open? So that's a question that I have for you guys. You don't have to answer it now, but I mean, as you're thinking about closing this gap, let's not think that fees is the only way to close the gap.
Okay. Thank you, Marilyn. I appreciate that. And that was the goal of this, is brainstorming and to gather thoughts from the board and the community. And what I would like to do at the end of this, as we go through and look at this, would be between now and January to have staff that would like to, or advisory board members that would like to be part of this process. We'd love to have you work with staff on exactly on how we close that gap. So thank you.
Okay. My next question is about tournament fees. When the sports pavilion was proposed and debated, I think one of the selling points was that there were going to be all this new revenue come in that would essentially underwrite that building or the operating costs of it. And when you showed your list of all the fee increases, I didn't see any tournament entry fee increases. Lindsay, can you explain where that fits?
Yeah, Lindsay. Sure. Sorry. Lindsay Hart, Assistant Director. Yes, that is being analyzed as well. And again, I apologize if that was not clear. We just wanted to show you some examples of fees, but we are looking at increasing all fees, and that would be included as well. So we have all of our facility rental fees put together, and that includes the tournament rentals for SPL as well.
Okay. In your examples of how much new money you could generate, are those net of the extra costs you're going to incur to collect money from everybody who comes into a rec center? You know, it takes staff to collect $2 from every person who comes in the door. So my question is, those projected revenue increase, have you already deducted out what your additional costs are going to be to implement those fees?
Lindsay Hart, Assistant Director. Yes and no. The estimates we gave were just purely on increasing the fees, but we already have staff in place that have to check access cards. And so we already have those people working, and we don't anticipate that we're going to have much of an increase for that. Their duties are just going to be different. So instead of checking the cards, they would be taking the admission fees. And so we don't anticipate that it's going to affect our expenses that much more.
Okay. And my final thing is a comment, and that is that overall of this, you know, my biggest interest has always been in maintaining access for low income populations. I'm not persuaded that the We Folks Scholarship Fund and the Adult Scholarship Fund are going to completely address the inequities that are going to take place if, say, you start charging fees for entry into rec centers. There are a lot of people who aren't going to go through the red tape of applying for scholarships. That you know, I can think of a lot of different situations where people might not come and apply to the department. They just drop out. They just stop showing up. And so as you guys work on this, I'm really interested in a more robust equity plan that covers not only people who enroll in programs, but people who come to open swim, open gym, those sorts of things, and how, you know, we make sure we're not pushing away people who are unemployed or poor.
Can I answer that? You want me to?
Oh, go ahead if you want to. Yeah.
Derek Rogers, Director of Parks and Recreation. I think there are ways that we could do that when in doubt, that we would still provide access to everyone below, you know, that'd be brainstorming. I think that's part of what we've worked through with the board members, and how do we provide an equitable admissions, kind of like the milk crates I talked about. There's part of our community that can pay, and there's parts that can't. So why couldn't we incorporate a piece of that? And so I think that going forward, if that's what we look at, filling that gap, we would love to have some input board members to help us make sure that we have an equitable program that allows our community and those that are marginalized or have financial hardships still have access to our facilities.
I'd appreciate that. And it'll be good for you to ask board members, but I think I'm really looking for a strong commitment on the part of you professional staff leaders that you don't settle for a couple little scholarship funds and say, okay, we're doing equity, that you look at equity very robustly across the board. And holistically, I would really urge you to do that. That'd be really fantastic to see. And I think you'd end up doing better with the community when all this gets announced, or whatever you end up raising fees on or whatever gets announced. We know there are going to be a lot of unhappy people. And if you can show that you've really developed a robust equity plan, I think it will reduce the amount of community opposition you're going to find.
Thank you. Appreciate the comments.
I'm done now.
Thanks, Marilyn. Andrea, Val, anyone else want to speak next from the board?
Oh, this is Val Renault, board member. Oh, sorry, Andrea. I just wanted to thank Marilyn for.
Yeah, I was pretty much
expressing
going to
that.
do that as well. Basically, really just emphasizing the what she said on the equity piece and making sure that we explore all those options to ensure that people who want to visit aren't turned away because of that reason. And then other than that, I'm going to brainstorm on some other ideas, but that's all I have at this time. So.
Thanks, Andrea. Val?
I was thinking, Val Renault, board member. I was thinking about what Marilyn said about how people just, they tend to drop out if things get beyond their reach. So, maybe we do some kind of more active outreach with the scholarship funds. Every time sponsorships come up, I kind of groan because I was on the board committee that we were, a bunch of us were trying to look at sponsorships, but it's been difficult to get together and to make that happen. And I know Roger has 2 new staff members who we were hoping could be part of that, but it's so while we're not really driving full speed ahead on the sponsorships, I'd like to maybe see more emphasis on scholarships because we do have a generous community and they do take a lot of pride in, I think, what Parks and Rec is able to do. So that's just my thought about the equity is maybe really pushing those. Are those scholarships held at the Douglas County Community Foundation or is that? It's held through the department. Okay.
Yeah.
I know fundraising and looking for sponsors, those, I worked, and I think I've told you before, I worked at the KU Business School for a while and we had our own endowment office, so yeah, when you're trying to get gifts, you need to put some resources into getting the gifts. And so I feel like we keep going around in circles on that a little bit, that we just have to accept where we are and try to move forward with some board member help if we can, I guess.
Thanks, Val.
All right. Amber Nickel, board member. I know it sucks. We all have to do it. I mean, it is what it is. And so I don't have a lot of budgeting is not my strong suit, but I am really good with ideas. So I agree that if there's a way to make it so it's not just flat across the board. So I think there's a lot of things you can do. I think there's a lot of really interesting business models where it's pay what you can or pay for somebody else. So I mean, I think there's all kinds of things that can be explored that can make it simple, easy, and still equitable. Things like maybe instead of having to get a scholarship, there can just be X number of free entries in any given day. And you can visually see, and if maybe I'm coming in to pay and I can see there's no more, I can say, well, I'll pay for me and I'll pay for 2 more people, something like that. Or having happy hours. So those hours where it's slow, it's free entry for everybody during the happy hours. things like that. Also, I agree, like I am a mom of a kid that goes to Sports Pavilion a lot, and it would be a real pain to have to constantly reload him, but to have a membership option that I know just that it's going to cover all of his running to all the different places throughout the year would be ideal for me, honestly. And so I always try to think of like, what do we need and what do we have? So increasing rental prices on facilities, and you can say you can earn free rental or discounted rental by volunteering at the emergency shelter. Like get your group together and have we'll take Saturdays so that we can use Holcomb in the spring when we need it or however that's. So further just things that were crossing my mind.
You need to write those. Every time you get an idea, right?
I carry my notes.
How to raise
I never get it terrible.
Great. Yeah. So listening to Jackie Becker, Chair, you're listening to everybody. I am the one thing I think that for me is most important is the transparency. And so if there are these 1,500 fee options, I think both the board and the general public should get a look at what you were thinking. And I think that should be made available to the whole community. I'm hoping we are looking for another conversation, some more community engagement on this, because just look at that. 2 crazy, wonderful ideas. There's probably thousands of those out there that might actually be useful for us and we could take to heart as ways that we will not be hopefully losing populations and losing our community members to being able to participate in parks and recreation, because we know how critically important that is to the welfare of a community. So I would love more community engagement, and I know sponsorship is something that is starting again. As someone who was in an industry that was closed for 1.5 years of my entire life, I know how long it takes, and I agree. So I'm happy to see that this is a 2024 thing. And we're going to hold, I want to hold you to it next year to make sure that we are really looking at where we're going to go with sponsorship for 2024, because we should be able to hopefully by next year be showcasing everything that we offer and all these ideas that we have. Now let's get some businesses and some private citizens who want to help fund some of these things or have their logo or whatever it is, their name, their donations, whatever it is, to tie in with our community. I think that's really important. Beyond that, I know something that Val, we talked about a lot when we were doing sponsorship meetings was a foundation concept. So when someone asked where those scholarships were from, I would love to see some research in that too, and how can Parks and Rec be included in a foundation or through DCCF? So if someone does want to give a gigantic lump sum, is that something that can be used and put towards our community also? So I think those are the things I see from listening to everybody and whatnot from our board side of where we should start going. So
a few comments on these questions here. John Nalbandian, board member. My reaction and thoughts. I really appreciate the logic that's gone into this. And I think the idea of, adopting what Boulder has done in terms of budget and the way you think about it is something that I really appreciate. And I think the more that we can connect staff with what's going on in other places, like the equity thing, it can't be just something that's happening in Lawrence. It's got to be happening all over the country.
Best practices.
So, you guys attending conferences, that's so important, all of that stuff. But I think the peer comparisons are really important, and the logic of how you're going about this. So the fee increases, not sure the exact amounts and so on, but the idea of fee increases seems logical, especially given other places as well. I am reluctant to charge for admission to, the facilities we don't charge now, but I'm not opposed to it either.
This is Pat Phillips, board member. I appreciate everyone's creative ideas. I'm a little different as far as the term uniqueness of our community having free access to the recreation facilities. When I first moved here in 1990, I thought that was amazing and unique, but not necessarily a good idea. And because I see it as a sustainable revenue. But I look at it at those that can afford membership, and there's many people, myself included, would do that. And then also check off the box to pay for another family to be able to get membership. But with Marilyn, you stated it beautifully as far as the need to look at it being equitable and not hard for people to get access that can't afford it. So that's where it gets creative. And scholarships, I know that's been the pop word, and maybe that needs to be on our agenda all the time to keep it accountable and movement on that. So you start targeting your vendors and foundations and businesses, and it's not coming from within the city, this scholarship money. And I know, there's another thing you can look at people's income, and below a certain level that they can freely come in. You can look at yearly membership or daily, like you do the pool. So there's a daily fee and a yearly fee. So there's many different ideas, but I think staying away from a fee to use our facilities is staying away from a sustainable revenue.
Any other board member thoughts or comments right now on all of this? We're online here. Okay. So it's now going to time to open it up for public comment. Okay, so we're going to be looking for some public comment now. The main thing to remember is you have 3 minutes. And Roger, how do we select? Is there someone who'd like to speak? I know I saw a little question come up in the chat. So.
Yeah, if you want to rate, okay, Stephen, I know you do. So if you want to go ahead and unmute and we'll.
Well, thank you hear me?
For other people, please use the raise your hand feature and we'll call on you that way. Stephen, if you'd state your name and everything there for the record as well.
Sure, fantastic. My name's Stephen Coprince. I'm a Lawrence resident, former member of a couple advisory boards. So thank you to this board for all the work that you do, and to LPRD for the work that you're putting in as well. I just want to weigh in on this issue of access fees to the rec center. I use SPL about 5 days a week, mostly using the cardio, the weight equipment, and playing pickleball.
Froze on us.
Exercise, especially in the winter now, when I'm thing. If we impose a, go ahead.
You froze for a moment. So
oh no!
With the bad internet connection, you may want to just lose the picture and talk. We can still.
All right, sure thing. Let me go ahead and do that. All right, now you can't see my pretty face, but hopefully you can hear me. So I would say I use SPL about 5 days a week. I go there and I use the cardio, I use the weights, I play pickleball, occasionally walk on the track. A $2 user fee doesn't sound like much, but if you do the math, you know what that cost me? $500 a year. $500 a year is what a $2 per user would cost. That's nuts. And so, I understand where we're coming from with fees, but if you go to the community and say to someone who's a regular user like me, something that was free is not going to run you $500, there are going to be some issues with other folks who are there, especially because, and we've talked a lot about equity, some of the folks that I'm there with are retirees on fixed incomes. They're single parents who are struggling to pay the bills. I mean, there's all walks of the community here who have the chance to exercise at the East Lawrence Rec Center or at SPL or at the community building that we might be shutting out. And I know there's a scholarship, and I'm not going to, I don't know the numbers of that. But I think that if you do the fee, you have to at least consider a reasonable yearly option. I just pulled up the Planet Fitness website. You can get a membership at Planet Fitness for $10 a month. And so if you're asking me to pay $40 a month to go to SPL to use your equipment, I'm just going to go to Planet Fitness, right? And so I think that, one thing that LPRD needs to consider if they're going to impose these access fees is the extent to which the fees are going to reduce usership. And if you structure the fee in the wrong way, especially, it's going to reduce usership. I can guarantee you that. People who are using the facilities right now to play pickleball indoors, when it's nice out, they're just going to play outside. People who are saying, oh, $2 a day, that's $40 a month, I'm just going to join Planet Fitness. So I would want those things to be considered. And then the final thing I would mention is, speaking on behalf of, I think, others in the community, if you are asking folks to pay that $2 fee, and I just sat there at SPL for my son's basketball tournament this weekend, big crowd, great crowd. And the previous day I had sat for a basketball game at Bishop Seabury, where my daughter attends. And one thing that was very noticeable was the fact that at the Seabury gym, there are corporate banners all over the place. And in our gym, there aren't, and I know we've talked about this topic before, but I think that if you're going to go to the community members and say, pay $2 every time you come in here, and there's not a single banner in any of those basketball courts. There's those little signs when you walk down the stairs, and that's it. People are going to say, you're not doing enough to try to generate funds from other sources. Why are you coming to me first? Why isn't Court 8 the McDonald's court with their banners everywhere? So I would say, just as a matter of perception from the community, that unless you can show the community that this truly is the last resort, which I know was the phrase that was used before, but I haven't heard it tonight. I think there's going to be some objections, and I won't be the only one. So I just wanted to make those comments. Again, this is on my own behalf and not anybody else's. And I do appreciate all the work that LPRD is doing and you as the board are doing. I unfortunately have to run. I've got a birthday party, my son's birthday party, that I've been skipping to hear this meeting. But thank you for hearing me out. I really appreciate it, and hope to have the chance to talk with you again in the future.
Thank you so much. Looks like Ray Mendoza. See your hand raised. Welcome.
Oh, you're muted.
You're muted. Hi, Ray, you're muted.
Okay, you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry about that. I'm an avid golfer here in Lawrence. Been playing Eagle Bend for 15 plus years. And you guys always had a yearly pass at Eagle Bend to make it affordable for us locals here. And that was taken away and replaced it with the club card. But the club card's going away now. And I understand why you guys are raising fees. But it's get to a point like avid golfer like myself that plays 3 to 5 times a week is really unaffordable, these rates, for me to continue playing. And it'd be sad for me to have to go find somewhere else to play because I can't afford these rates as much if I want to play golf. So there have been any talks about bringing back the yearly pass at Eagle Bend. We used to have it years ago.
We'll wait until the end of public comment. Ray, if you've got other things, we do have somebody here from golf that's just going to provide just an overall update to the board. But if you have other things, go ahead and ask your questions and do your public speaking. How's that? We'll give you an update here when we at the end of the public comment.
Oh, that's what I have. I mean, we're raising the rates at Eagle Bend, but what are we getting for that? Because right now I don't see what benefit is going to be for me to continue playing at Eagle Bend when you raise the rates. And I would hate to have to go somewhere else to play, or I'd rather stay here. But I just want to see the yearly rates come back to Eagle Bend like we used to have years ago.
Yeah. Thanks, Ray.
That was it. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ray. Anyone else that is out there right now that is interested in making public comment on the proposed fee increases for the city of Lawrence? Seeing any last section of hand raising? Okay.
Can we bring it back to a board then?
Okay, all right, so now it's back to the board.
I don't know. There are some things to one of the public members inputs on some of the things that they'd like to see changed, and we've had some discussions over time. And so Kent Reddick's here, and he might be able to provide some updates on things that could happen or they're reviewing for possibilities.
Yeah, Kent Reddick, Recreation Operations Manager. We are looking at several options when it comes to Eagle Bend Golf Course. The fee increases are the first step, and if you're looking at them compared to last year's, they're formatted a little differently, so it might appear to be a bigger increase. We did not go to the full 30%. We did our market comparisons, and we are competitive with everybody around us, and even some comparable golf courses up in the Upton County area. So, but we are looking at improvement. The first thing we're looking at doing next year is to offer online tee times. We're more transparent to the customers, more available to the customers, and that provides better customer service. We're also looking at putting out an RFP when it comes to concessions to see if we can improve the amenities out at the Eagle Bend. And that could be, next year, it could be 2 or 3 years down the road, because part of that might include some work on the concession building out there. We're going to increase our offerings in our local leagues, as well as increase lessons out there for youth and adult to help build the game of golf while we're providing a quality course for them to play on. So that's kind of where we're at with golf. I mean, any other thing you want to add?
I didn't know if you were considering, or staff were looking into the possibility with the club card going away and doing something else, but
yeah,
it might be too early.
We can discuss the club card option. The challenge with the club card option, it does provide a discount for certain golfers that have paid club card. And the organization that manages that have not done a good job of reimbursing us for those losses. But that is something we can negotiate and see if they're willing to come back. As far as the pass he was talking about earlier, honestly, I'm not familiar with that. It seems something that's haven't been talked about, so we can go back in historic and see if it's like a monthly or an annual pass, and then figure out whether that's valuable for the local ones that play frequently.
This is John Nalbandian, board member. I think you said earlier, though, that the biggest cost reduction would be if you could use treated water.
Yes.
Is that still part of the capital request?
It is, and Mark he knows the capital improvement request better than I do.
Yeah, Mark Becker, Assistant Director. There's still a project we're working on to use untreated water both on the golf course and on the athletic field complexes. It's a very large project. It's about a $1.5 million project, but over a period of time, it'll pay off for us.
Oh, yeah.
As opposed to us paying full price for water. So that I think will probably happen late 23, early 24. Where we'll be intercepting the water off the feed that comes to the city. So we'll pick that off before it goes to the water treatment plant. And then we'll use a pump system to distribute it out to our athletic complexes. So that's going to be a huge cost saving in the future.
Okay.
But it's not going to help us right now.
Yeah, you ought to have a sign out of Eagle Bend that says, your fees were increased because we're now paying for 100 million gallons of water or whatever.
That answers some raise things. So, any other questions or comments within us?
I thought what the gentleman, this Pat Phillips, board member, what the gentleman was talking about, making sure that if it is looked at membership fee for access, that you do not lose people because it's going to be higher than other providers. And, holiday would they too, it'd be different. So, a set amount, if that's something that society.
Yeah, one of the artists and director, that one of the first slides I showed where it showed the theoretical versus the what's realistic, that's exactly what we're looking at, because we understand if we start to price ourselves too high, we will lose, and then we don't get any revenue because no one's attending. And so that's all the way down to a fitness class, or it could be all the way up to a membership to SPL. So we absolutely keep that into account. And I appreciate what what he said, and we are mindful and fearful of that as well. And that's why it is a delicate balance that we have to try and increase fees, but we don't want to lose our community. And so we have to be realistic and try to keep it at a reasonable rate. So we understand that. Yeah, thank you.
Amber Nickel, board member. I would just say that I think the purpose of, having Parks and Rec, one of the purposes to have a healthier community, right? And so I like the idea of those people that being rewarded for using more, right? Somebody that golfs 3 times a week, there should be something that incentivizes and helps make that less expensive overall. Somebody that plays pickleball comes, and I just like that idea of the more you come, the deeper discounts you can get.
As a swimmer, I think I've always accepted that you have to pay a certain amount of money. So, the whole pay more, I kind of always buy the annual one because I know how many times I go to the pool. So it fee-wise makes the most sense for me. So I think, again, a swimming pool is very different than a gym, but it is, you could hit a place in life where charges become understood as long as it's reasonable. Again, I like what you said, and I had never thought about it that way, but I really enjoy the fact that Lawrence does have everything is free. I go home to where I come from and it's very expensive. It ties into my thing. I want to know, now that we're doing the key fobs, who and how many people are coming outside of Lawrence, Kansas. And I do think one of the things we really should look at is if our services are that much better, we have that much better equipment, and we're having people come from out of our area, they should be paying a chunk more money than what we are paying. And hopefully that can do some offsetting. But I'd love to see those numbers as time goes on with the fobs, and if we can tell where people are coming from. And if, are they using our services or not in this county? Take a look at that. Awesome. Thank you. Online board, any more comments and thoughts on what we've been going over? So then I know it's been asked of the board, do you want us to set up another committee, or how did you want more engagement from us?
I would like that. And so I'll rely, how do we usually do the task force? We haven't done one for a while, so I'll rely on Roger's guidance on that.
Right. We just can't have a quorum.
Mm-hmm.
So if there are individuals that want to participate, I know, Amber, you had mentioned last meeting that you, not trying to put you in that spot this week, or this month, but I know last month you said that you were willing to be a part of discussion. And with all those ideas, I think that's a good thing. So, it's, up to the board. We can have up to 4 people, or,
You can 4. Yeah, 2 4.
Are there board members with expendable time that we could start another committee to really dive deep into this?
Say the task force.
Task force?
And has an end.
Task force, okay. Task force. So do we have some members interested in that?
It's Marilyn.
From Maryland.
I'm interested in helping out. My time is limited between now and Christmas, so I don't know what the timeline is on all of this. But if the activity that you're seeking is in January, then I would try to be more available for that.
And maybe it can even be because of this time, like emails and just specific questions sent to people and generating ideas or discussion that way until.
Well, and the other thing that I think the pandemic has brought is Zoom.
Sure.
It makes it very easy to jump on and jump off. But again, schedules, I understand that, Marilyn, that we all can have a loaded schedule as well. But technology is there and we might as well utilize it.
So what is our deadline? Can I defer to that? And when are we allowing, or when are we having the public engagement section also beyond this meeting?
This was supposed to be the beginning of the public engagement. And so we were looking to take feedback to refine our fees, because we're still $2 million short in 2023, to bring forward a proposal in January at the advisory board meeting to set the fees in February. February. So between now and January 9th, we'd be looking at trying to do the bulk of this work.
Jackie Becker, Chair. So with the fact that this information came out Friday to the public, is that correct? Or when did this get released to the public? Okay. So I personally I think we need more public engagement than this weekend to this meeting today. So can we, along with having a task force, can there be, how can I ask of you all, can we do more public engagement on this?
Well, but there's another question though, whether the public engagement ought to be here or whether we're going to be at a stage fairly soon where the public engagement ought to be with the city council. I mean,
so the fees are set at the department level based on recommendations. So there isn't anything in city code that fees need to go to the city commission. Just saying that. So fees are based on recommendations of staff, not to say that we can't. But we also are looking at this gap is not going to get any smaller, so that we don't do fees in February. Let's say the fees are pushed back to March. We have a shorter time frame of trying to close that gap of $2 million. And so as a city, how do we balance this budget?
Okay, well, yeah.
Gary, one thing that I'm thinking of, let me go back and talk to our community engagement team and kind of come up with that plan a little bit, put some thought into how to make that engagement happen during the holidays.
Right,
on top of that,
right.
That's the thing we're up against.
To January 9th.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, if you want me to, I can kind of work with Porter's group and figure out some other avenues. And we may call on the advisory board, as that board liaison with the community. I mean, you're the eyes and ears, but again, as the meetings the engagements happen, it's always good to have other folks, especially you that help us decide things, be the eyes and ears as well.
Yeah,
that sounds good.
Okay. All right. So then, Jackie Becker, Chair, in terms of the task force, we have Marilyn. Are you saying yes?
Yeah.
All right. Anybody else? I would be, since this is kind of a fast timeline, I'm interested. If there's no other interest, please get us a few people. Because again, I think Steve, who spoke earlier, talking about should fees be a last resort. And so I think it's important that we, we're doing it now, but to make sure that we have overturned every stone, make sure we've double checked everything. So when we look back to our community, we can say, yes, we've looked at everything. So, all right. So, all right. So any other, moving into concerned members, items of interest for the board now, beyond fees. Anyone?
This is just open things.
Yeah, this is the open. This is the open time.
This is the open time. All right, that's being clarity. Well, I know some of you know this is my last meeting because my term has ended, and I just felt it was important to look through the lens of idea when you look at our advisory board too, and there's going to be a vacant spot, and who's not represented, and I look around and I think of youth. And in any way that I'm going to try to, think of people, young people that would be interested in making that commitment to come and to apply for this. And we might want to tweak it because they're young people, maybe a year, or, you might want to look at, to what would be a reasonable commitment. But I just feel that I look around and I just think that there are some people missing at this time. So, but I'm also so grateful to have been part of this. I mean, I think you put it that it is, it's a part of my health, my holistic health is part of recreation, but it's also, it's a part of my community's health. So it wasn't anything that was work. It was something that comes out of passion. And I know you all are here for that reason. So thank you all.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much. Marilyn, Andrea, John? Any comments or thoughts?
Maryland Hall board member, just sort of an announcement. Some conversation with the LPRD group is continuing. And there's actually a meeting this Wednesday to actually out on the loop to consider possible locations for some sort of a installation commemorating LPRD. So if anybody's interested in attending that, I can give you the meeting info. Otherwise, I'll be there and I can report back.
Thanks for that, Marilyn. Anyone else? Comments, thoughts, items of interest? Okay, then we're moving on to F, which is the other. And we'll start with communications and events.
Thank you. Roger Steinbrock, Communications Events Manager. I've been working with the Transient Guest Tax Grant Program. We've had several meetings, and Friday we allocated $150,000 recommended these grants to be given out to 30, or there are 30 actual applications for money, and 27 of them got some sort of funding, is what they're recommending to the City Commission to approve at the December 20th meeting. Of the 30 grant proposals that we had, they totaled $360,300. So we're giving $150,000 out. So a lot of needs aren't being met, but they are. I mean, the board did a good job in helping to distribute to make sure that allocations were distributed, and they really looked at some different local events and grant proposals that had probably a smaller amount. They funded a couple at 100% because of the request and the way they did that. So that's what I've been working on. In terms of other things, we had a sign rededication at Woody Park on Friday as well. It was a busy day on Friday. And I don't know if you've been by, but, look at the sign, and there is a history of Elgin on there, and his birthday was, he turned 134 years. He would have been 134 years old if he was still with us. And so that was also neat, and just reflections, and as I was standing there, I know it's taking more time, but I really looked at what was there, as Camp Woody, helping those folks that are in need of houses during that period of time. And as Bart Littlejohn and even Elgin's grandson spoke, grandson spoke. Grandson. The idea of helping community was a big piece to him, and service. And I thought, what a great service that space provided to the community, especially the community that is in need, and especially at this time of year. I thought he would have smiled at the use of that park during that time. But now it's time, and we were reminded that 50 years ago next year is when it named for Woody Park. So maybe there's some things we can do to look at expanding or developing the park a little bit more in the future. And to you, I've worked with you, and I know that Mark and I are probably the ones that have been the longest lasting on here. I know that your work on this book right here, the year that took out of your life, the master plan, being on that steering committee, and even before that, your association with Bernie and everything, you know, and hearing your stories of getting up at 4 a.m. and running. And when I was a big runner and advocate, you always were inspiring to me to see just how much you lived an active, healthy lifestyle. And to me, that's what I've tried to do too, in terms of, I know I don't look like it right now personally, but I looked at Parks and Recreation in many of the same ways, about that wellness, being a lifelong wellness type person. I always think of lifelong learning. I come from an education background as well, but it is a holistic thing, and you have to look at all those components. And I always think that you always brought that to the board in terms of the way that you process things. Your analytical mind, as well as your compassionate side, always had that nice balance. And so I just want to say I appreciate your thoughts that you've always had for the board, and have always directed us in a way that was really about community. And I really value that, and it's going to be missed. But I know there are many other people around this table that have that same center. But I just want you to know just how inspiring you've been to me, and you've kept me running a lot longer because of your, you know, just hearing your story of going up and running as much as you've done. I mean, you've done tremendous amounts, and, you know, more Ironman, I think, isn't that what you were doing more of? And I could never do that, but you inspired me to continue running a lot longer than I probably would have. But so thank you for your example, not only of service, but also just your daily life that helps inspire people. So thank you.
Yes, very well.
And that's my report.
Thank you so much. Moving on to Parks with Mark Tucker.
Yeah, on the park side, we're basically moving into the winter maintenance mode. So that's where we go through all of our mowing equipment, make sure everything's operational for the next year, switch to snow removal equipment, which nobody wants to talk about, but we have to be ready the first time the snow falls. We also get into a lot of maintaining the outdoor lights we have up. So that's an everyday occurrence where we go through and say what's not working and why. So that works, chasing the leaves, getting ball diamonds prepped for next year's season. So there's a lot of winter things we're working on right now. At the administrative side, we're transitioning both the HR management system this year is going to be a new system going into next year, and our financial system is switching over. So that's a huge change for everyone from the managers on up, trying to say, okay, here's where we're budgeting now, but that's going to be over there now. A whole different set of numbers, but we can't lose money going from here to here. So that's something that's consuming a lot of staff time right now. But anyway, that's just generally what we're working on, but a lot of winter projects, and we're prepping CIP projects for next year.
Any questions, comments for that? Okay, we can move on to recreation.
Lindsay Hart, Assistant Director. Most everything was in the recreation report, so I don't have too much to add. I just want to say we had a great turnout at the SPL Holiday Extravaganza, which was about a week ago. They had over 200 vendors, and they were able to expand back onto 3 courts. So it was really good to see that. They had a great turnout, and I was able to come visit, and the place was packed. It was hard to find a parking spot. So anyway, we've had some fun holiday events. The Nature Center also had one that evening and had over 300 people attend. Wow. And so we're really excited about some of the momentum we're bringing back for some special events. And so that's been really neat to see. And that's all I have.
It's really amazing how you guys cleaned up after the event out there at the sports complex. It was like the next day, it's like nothing.
Being able to pivot, right. Very important things for sure. So, any more questions or comments for Lindsay? Okay. Then we're moving on to the director report.
We did the
Santa got rescued, so we're good this year. So that's always nice. And we did the old-fashioned horse parade, and that went off without a hitch. And I think that went very smoothly. No pun intended. Yeah. Thank you. Unmistakable Identity, we're presenting tomorrow in coordination with Municipal Services Organization. That's more of Gateways of Lawrence. That's in our 2040 plan, and it also deals with aesthetics and design of bridges and architectural designs and what could a gateway be. And so we're having that discussion, and they're talking about there's going to be a double diamond intersection at 6 and the Lawrence Traffic Way. So that's not going to be a new bridge, but it is going to be unique. So that's coming. And should there be a welcome sign to Lawrence or structure or sculpture or something? And then at Youth Sports Complex at that intersection of Wakarusa or 27th, where it intersects the traffic way, which is a real problem area. There will be some money. So KDOT gets some money for aesthetics. And so that one might have some dollars that the city could match and do something as a gateway with aesthetics and designs and some other things. And then they'll talk about Iowa and 59. I think they mentioned, if you were paying attention, the loop, they talked about taking the loop over that street instead of under, which, and just behind, in city staff talking that maybe that's probably a better location for a gateway on if that ends up being a grid crossing than the 59 highway. It may get something with the city brand, new brand, we rebranded. That's just City of Lawrence and lights, and that might be all the KDOT fund or KDOT funds available. And then the discussion's been that somewhere to the east of Lawrence, between 23rd Street and the Lawrence Traffic Way, there probably ought to be something that says, hey, this is Lawrence. And we kind of miss out on that. And everybody says Eudora, and I don't leave Lawrence too often, so I need to go out and look at Eudora's sign or whatever they've got. I hear great things about it. So that's on tomorrow night. There'll be some KDOT speaking and Jake Baldwin, and I'm looking forward to that. And last but not least, thank you, Pat Phillips, for serving. I understand and appreciate the volunteer time of everybody on this board and the commitment and your insights, and it's truly appreciated. So thank you for all you've done for us over the years.
Thanks, Darren.
So I have.
All right. You're getting cheers up there too. So yeah. As I said in my email to you, Pat, I think I was in denial of you stepping down. When I saw it first, and I was like, I'm not ready to respond to that. Not today, but yes, thank you for everything and coming onto this board after you. You've always been this calming presence and this kind of breath of fresh air that's like, let's take a second to listen to what Pat has to say, because it's so honest and truthful and inspiring and really motivating to always think about community. And I think you lead that, your heart first with all of that. And so it's been just a pleasure to work with you too, all these years on Parks and Rec Board.
And with that said, we have 2 other members that have re-upped and will be reappointed in yourself, as well as John Nalbandian. So thank you for serving.
I did at 11 o'clock at night, but I did. So, and, thank you. I know putting this presentation together has been massive and has been a lot. And thank you for continuing to share information and engaging all of us and answering every single question. There's lots more questions to be answered, but hopefully we can, get that gap where it needs to be. So accountability wise, from a board perspective, we're pushing you to where we need to be going as a community. So, hopefully everyone's enjoying the lights too.
Yes.
That's one thing I'm going to say. That's so much fun when they all appear and brighten the downtown area. But calendar wise, make sure we're noticing that our next meeting is Monday, January 9th. And then the next one is Monday, February 13th. And then of course the LDC health presentation on Tuesday, February 28th. And I know you kind of did some talk on that yesterday. So do we need to talk about anything with it, or
we just got together real quick and made sure that he was clear on what our purpose was. And he says he's got all the info and it's going to be a great presentation. So.
Well, hopefully many of us can make that. And I think it's going to be an incredible, I know it was the first time I heard it. It was a really big learning experience for me. So.
Right. And
what time is it?
1 o'clock. 1 o'clock.
And I put it on your agenda too, so it should be on there.
Yeah, it's on the bottom of the sheet, John. Number 3 on the calendar.
Oh, okay.
But where is it?
It's at the Carnegie.
Oh, I think we said the community building in the meeting last time, but it is the Carnegie is what I was told by Gail. Just a couple things. Next month, we will be electing new chair and vice chair. So what we'll do is we'll open up the meeting with Jackie leading it. Typically, the chair doesn't change at this meeting. She'll basically, next meeting will be the last meeting that you chair, unless the person that's elected wants to restart the meeting and do that way. But usually we've just had continuity and we just continue on. So your full year ends at the end of next month. Okay. So
I just did it early last because Bart dropped off earlier. Okay.
Right. Exactly.
I'm a month ahead of schedule then.
Okay. You got it right. So that's the thing. The other thing I'm looking at is with Derek is kind of putting together the calendar for the year and earmarking certain dates or times where there will be discussion similar, because we know the CIP is something that comes up. I know we have to have stuff in by March. So we probably will look at February. We need to do COMA, the Kansas Open Meetings review as well. And then maybe even fees and those types of things if we need to start, getting them on the calendar so the agenda is kind of has some earmarks for conversation. We're learning too as we move to a different type of a board setting. In the past, this isn't the way the board is operated. And we're trying to adjust and accommodate and really make the board active and helping us do the labors for the city as well. So.
Well, then I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
I will make Amber Nickel board member. I will make a motion to adjourn.
Yeah, I'm a Bandy board member also.
All right. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye or raise your hand. Aye. Just over 2 hours. We are adjourned. Good job, everyone.
Sorry, I missed those last few minutes. My battery went out. Anyway, that's where I was.